This is Adopting Identities. Written by This Is Entertaining. Read to you by Evening Ruby. Chapter 4. Peter was pretty sure his jaw hit the floor around the time they drove up to the Avengers Tower. At this point, they were halfway across the lobby and he still hadn't managed to close it, not that he was trying very hard. He'd never dared to get close to the tower back when he was hiding his secret identity, as it was too risky. He'd even turned down an internship at Stark Labs just to be safe. He'd heard that it was impressive, but he hadn't been expecting this. There were huge windows, plants that probably cost more than the house he grew up in, and chairs more expensive than most cars. Holographic images and stark smart screens sat everywhere, boasting of the wealth and technological advancements of the owner. And that was just the lobby. So engrossed in the sheer impressiveness of his surroundings, Peter physically leapt at the somewhat haughty foreign voice that sounded from nowhere, actually. "Welcome to the tower, Mr. Parker." Thanks," he offered, glancing at Tony and Pepper. The three of them and Rhodey were the only ones in the elevator, the others either opting to use other means or going using their powers. Just the thought had his hands twitching, eager to scale those pristine reflective windows and sling from the top of the city's tallest tower. But, he reasoned, he couldn't exactly get a tour from the outside, and the view would be better in the morning. Actually, it may be better to wait until he could get a new suit. The one he had was honestly starting to look more and more like a patchwork quilt. The Avengers had money, though. They could probably even get him the good material. Oh, and have someone else make it for him. Maybe a small, sassy woman like the one from the Pixar movie. Maybe she was based off a real person. That would explain the lack of capes on the Avengers. Other than, Thor and Vision. But Thor obviously got his outfits from Asgard, and who knew about Vision? Anyway, the suit. Maybe Tony and him could come up with some new kind of material, something that could survive being thrown around and stuff. Maybe a polycarbonate blend of Peter, meet Friday. Tony smirked as the elevator began to move. Peter was instantly jarred back to reality, his mind floundering for a moment in an attempt to return to the conversation. Oh right, the magical voice from the sky. Nice to meet you?" "A pleasure," the disembodied voice said smartly. "Feel free to call on me with any questions and concerns you may have." Thanks?" "Your floor is approaching," the voice called, and Peter was struck with understanding. "Friday's your AI?" "Yep," Tony said, popping the P with a smirk. "Whoa," the teen enthused, as the group left the elevator, his head craning back as though another glance at the apparatus would allow him to see the AI more clearly. "That's amazing! I heard you had incredible breakthroughs with artificial intelligence tech, but to actually see it is... wow. But I thought it was supposed to be called Jarvis or something." "Yes, well..." A calm male voice sounded, and Peter whirled in time to see Vision float through the floor. "I'm afraid that is me, or who I used to be, or a part of me. It's all rather quite confusing, I'm sorry to say." The younger boy's eyes bugged at the man's appearance, bouncing against the floor as though to test its solidity before the words fully processed. "Wait, so that means you're..." He turned to Tony. "Then you..." He switched back to Vision. "And you're a... I think I'm gonna need a whole story here." The man smiled softly, his cashmere-clad arms crossing comfortably. "Of course. Another time, presumably." "Right, of course." Peter's eyes cast around the rapidly filling living room. "This is amazing! I can get all the stories about the attacks from the past few years from the Avengers themselves. The whole, really, real truth. Whoa." Several of the Avengers smiled at that, but Tony only snarked. "Sure, kid. We can give you bedtime stories right after we tuck you in." Peter scowled. "I'm 15, not 5. "I should hope so," the man drawled. 13 and under can't go into the hot tub. It's on the label." "There's a hot tub?" "What am I asking? Of course there's a hot tub. Hey, what about How about we give you a tour instead of telling you everything that's in the tower?" Falcon. Sam. He introduced himself as Sam, interrupted. "Especially because it'd probably be easier for you to try and guess what isn't here." "Uh-huh," Tony responded. "I'll remember that next time you want to soak your shoulders after a mission." Sam snorted, but Peter was already eagerly moving closer to the bird-themed hero, eyes wide and eager. The veteran sent Stark a smug grin as he clasped the boy right on the shoulder. "Right. So, right now we're on the residential level, where the bedrooms are." "You all live on the same floor? This place is so huge, I thought you'd each have, a whole level or something." Sam shrugged and cast a glance at Tony. After all, he hadn't designed the place, but it was Steve who answered. "Believe it or not, Peter, it's not easy keeping a team with so many strong personalities together. There have been several times that we have clashed. Part of the reason we decided to move in together at the tower is to keep unity and camaraderie within the team. Living separately, even in the same building, wouldn't help that." The boy nodded, his eyes wide as he stared at the team that appeared to practically read each other's minds in battle and fought as though they were pieces of a puzzle just made to be slotted together. Despite Captain America's words, Peter couldn't wrap his mind around the idea of Earth's mightiest heroes ever struggling to get along. If only he knew. "Besides," Wanda spoke up from beside Vision, the first words she'd said since introducing herself to Peter. "This tower has anything you could want, only an elevator's right away. While our rooms are certainly spacious, we have no need for overly large rooms. We seldom spend time in them." Peter nodded in understanding. Of course, some areas are connected in a less conventional way than elevators. The boy jumped so high that had he been in Queens, he likely would have stuck to the ceiling, barely containing a shriek as he whirled to face a smirking Black Widow. "Holy... what the... how long... how did you... huh?" The red-haired woman smirked, but made no move to answer the half-spoken questions as the boy slowly regained his wits. As the teen caught his breath, the woman's words finally connected. "Wait, do you mean hidden passages and stuff? Are there hidden passages here?" "Well, that's for you to try and find, isn't it?" A sly smile answered him, and Peter could only gape in shock until Wanda distracted him by pointing to the nearest door and proclaiming it as her room, allowing him a quick peek inside. The rest of the Avengers followed, though some refrained from opening their doors, and the rooms belonging to Thor and Bruce were left untouched. Finally, they were standing at the door of one of the few unclaimed rooms. Tony smiled, though the expression seemed to be hiding a manic anxiety. "And this is your room." Peter gaped as he entered the room, a warmth stirring in his chest. Like the others, it was large, but not comically so like in rich people cartoons. The whole place was painted in dark blue except for the metallic silver of the doorways. The whole wall across from the entrance was taken up by gleaming windows, the view shaded by what was presumably the bottom of an A adorning the building. The whole of New York stretched out in front of him. The world seemed to consist of the glittering windows and dull gray siding of skyscrapers, peppering the horizon in a variety of sizes. Storefronts and streets were covered in colors as the crowds ebbed and flowed in an ever-moving display. Taxis flooded the streets in bright yellow, and the sounds of the busiest city drifted up into his bedroom. His heart swelled in his chest, and the boy felt an overwhelming sense of home. Wanda moved to join the boy as he stared out the window in wonder. "This is the best view," she informed him, her accent thick and smile sincere. Peter smiled back shyly at her, even as he imagined swinging out over the city from this very perch. "It's incredible," he responded, before finally dragging his eyes to the rest of the room. On one side of the wall sat a silver sliding door, presumably leading to a no-doubt walk-in closet, beside which sat an open door to his own personal bathroom. The layout was no different from the other rooms he'd seen, besides one thing. The bed sat lofted, the high ceilings of the building allowing for a small room to sit below the bed area. This one with reflective glass windows, hiding its inside from view. Tony interrupted the boy's gaping as he led him into the room, revealing an area filled with plug outlets, desk space, bookshelves, and technology Peter had only ever dreamed of. Tony's ever-present smirk seemed to intensify as Peter stuttered in amazement, seemingly incapable of real words. "Of course, I expect you to do most of your work in the lab with me, but a scientist has to have his own place after all." Yeah. Wow, this is... Thank you so much, Mr. Stark." The man scoffed, though his smirk didn't waver. "It's Tony. We're technically family." Wow, And he hasn't even shown you the most impressive part," Rhodey interrupted before the boy could embarrass himself even more. "Right. Friday, protocol smokescreen." Immediately, all technology in the room went dark, barring a few emergency lights. A handle popped out of a seemingly seamless portion of the floor. Without another word, the man pulled up on the handle, revealing a large metal hatch. Peter cast a nervous glance around the room, seeing only gravely serious faces, before following the billionaire down the hatch. The room was compact, but not quite tiny enough to cause instant claustrophobia. The walls were a shiny metallic. Along one wall was a pull-down cot secured upright tightly. Another wall held a chest, locked up tight, though a key was hanging on the wall behind it. Another had a chair complete with what looked like dozens of seat belts and straps. The final held a small fridge and what looked like a generator. This is probably the safest place in the entire world. The walls are made up of an anantanium alloy. The straps on the chair strategically placed to lessen pain from impact no matter what direction. You have a slew of non-perishables, enough for a month of regular eating, or at least 4 if you ration it severely. You also have a generator, satellite phone, and Wi-Fi. I recommend throwing a few books in too. Most importantly, thanks to the smokescreen protocol, Friday has no records of this ever existing. In fact, she shouldn't have any idea it exists at all. It doesn't show up on any of the blueprints. All plans I wrote were on paper and have been destroyed. This bunker is completely unknown, completely hidden, and completely safe. Heck, if my calculations are accurate, by the way, they always are, this thing should even be able to float. What is this? What is all this? Peter. Captain America's voice sounded as the man joined them, his presence making the room feel much more cramped. "We need you to promise with every fiber of your being that if we tell you to initiate smokescreen protocol, then you do it, immediately, no matter what's happening. I know we already talked about this, but you being associated with the Avengers puts you in more danger than you could know. We haven't signed the papers yet, because we need this promise first. We need to know that if there is danger that we think you need to hide, you'll be smart enough to listen to us. Can you promise us that, Peter?" I mean, I don't understand. This didn't make any sense, the boy thought confusedly. He was Spider-Man, after all. He'd fought the Green Goblin, the Lizard, Doc Ock. Sure, some of his villains were kind of lame, like Shocker and Rhino, but come on! He worked hard, and he'd put some pretty big names behind bars. Why would they invite him on the team just to hide him in a box? Was it because he was too young? Everyone always underestimated him. He could help. He knew he could. Steve Rogers seemed to understand the boy's confusion because he looked the teen in the eye and clapped his hand on his shoulder. I know, Peter. You're the kind of kid who wants to help. I know you're smart and will train you to defend yourself, to fight. But the people we are against are dangerous, Peter. Really dangerous. We need to know that you're safe, especially when you haven't had training. Oh, well, that made sense. Kinda. They wanted to train him. They probably had no clue just what he could do and were being overly paranoid. It was okay. It was annoying. He hated being underestimated all the time. At the same time, he supposed it was understandable. And it showed they actually cared what happened to him instead of throwing him to the wolf-themed supervillains, which was nice. It was really nice. He sighed. They probably knew a lot more about the villains they faced than he did. He'd just have to hope that he could impress them enough during training to keep him out of the room. Okay, I promise. If you call for me to hide, I'll come straight here. And not come out until we call? Tony led, and Peter repeated the words with a nod, causing Steve to grin. Good. Glad to have you, Peter. With a grin, he grabbed the lip of the bunker and pulled himself up with one arm as easy as standing. Show off, Tony grumbled. Peter barely noticed. Sedatedly following Stark up the ladder, his mind whirling so hard that jumping up never occurred to him. Even if everything technically made sense, he couldn't help the feeling that something was just off about the whole conversation. As he got to the top, however, the boy was quickly led away from the room, and the matter escaped his mind, unresolved. The rest of the tour seemed to both take forever and pass instantly. With each level, Peter grew more and more amazed with the size and function of the tower. While they started with the more domestic levels such as the bar and the living room area, the kitchens and the formal dining room, etc., they soon delved into more heroic levels. They had to practically drag the boy from Stark's labs. Then they actually had to drag him away from Banner's labs as the boy stood practically glued to the microscope slides. He blabbered genetic theories that were nearly over even Tony's head all through the boxing ring, gym, martial arts training areas, and exercise rooms. It wasn't until they took him to the second floor of training equipment that his blabbering came to a stop so quickly it was as though his voice were stolen. 2 or 3 floors had been emptied and conjoined to create what seemed to be a conglomeration of the world's greatest parkour park, high ropes course, rock climbing wall, and laser tag course. It was a seemingly unending mass of ropes, walls, platforms, and forts, and obstacles, pillars scattered throughout. Peter was silent as he gazed on in wonder, his sticky hands seeming to tingle with the desire to run up the walls, his mind's eye already painting the pillars and ropes with webbing. He could see markers designating the beginning and end points for races, a line drawn through the center as though for capture the flag. His breath caught in his chest at the myriad of possibilities. Told you he'd want to play, Nat said. Even without looking away from the chaotic masterpiece, Peter could hear her smirk. Yeah. I finished the iron harness last night. Harness? Peter turned to protest, but Wanda was already dragging him back to the elevator, excitedly describing the target range and the area above, complete with armory. Oh, I'm not really a fan of guns, Sam snorted. That's fine. Between Nat and Clint, we have everything from pea shooters to slingshots and potato shooters. I'm becoming a fan of tasers, Black Widow smirked, but Peter was already imagining using a range to practice his web shooting. The tour ended shortly after, finishing in a multimedia room where the team argued for a good 40 minutes about what they should order. Tony wanted to treat the boy to a gourmet meal from the Stark personal chef, but several others argued it would be a bit much for a kid whose idea of opulent meals was Olive Garden. Natasha wanted shawarma, but Steve refused to call when their favorite shop was closed and no one wanted to settle. Finally, they settled on good old pizza, though Tony insisted on ordering from a fancy artisanal place to culture the boy child's taste buds. After settling in with the comfort food and a movie that took them another 45 minutes to agree on, the group spent their first night completely together. For the first time in months, Peter didn't spend an evening in red and blue tights, risking life and limb as he fought through his failings and quipped through the pain. When the movie finally ended and the group meandered sleepily to their rooms, Peter fell asleep with a smile on his face for the first time in a long time.